is a bastion of masculinity. This is not a safe space. This is a wolf pack. This is fucking Sparta.
Welcome aboard.
Okay?
Got a letter today, too.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, we got thousands of them. I don't even know where to begin. But the letter today, and I memorized it. I'm that good. It's from our friend Dan Emmett, who's a retired Secret Service agent who was in the Marine Corps with me. He was a grunt, and he knows about Recon and Force Recon, but he doesn't understand how the Scout Sniper piece fits in.
Yep.
So he wrote a letter, said, could we explain that today? So, we got Fritz.
So welcome, Fritz. Thanks for coming, man.
You're welcome.
So Fritz comes to us like very storied. He's got a long career, 20 years in the Marine Corps, retired as a gunnery sergeant. Fritz did all things combat, man. This guy's a freaking black belt. He's a sniper. He was a freaking grunt. He's done MARSOC stuff. This guy's, he hates that I'm saying all this shit right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I know.
I'll help you. I'll
Just
help
a
you out,
dude
Fritz.
now.
But I brought you
No,
today,
you're a
Fritz,
fag.
because we want to talk about sniper shit,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And you were a fucking dude. You were the guy. So what I'd like to
That's
do
one
is,
of them, yeah.
yeah. So what I'd like to do is, I always start out by asking people, because I'm always interested in the transformation
Sure.
of people in the Marine Corps. And so if you wouldn't mind telling us, like, how did it come about that you found yourself in the Marine Corps?
So, interestingly, I grew up in like a really liberal household. I'm the first Marine. I'm not the only Marine now, but I was definitely the first Marine growing up. My dad was really against me joining the Corps, believe it or not. My mom was my biggest fan. I turned down a full ride scholarship to join the Corps on my 17th birthday. I kind of knew it early on. My buddies were seniors when I was a sophomore, and they all joined the Marine Infantry. And at that time, it was like, what? It was either I'm going to be a Navy SEAL or I'm going to be Marine Infantry. And the reason why I chose, because in those days, if you fail, well, you had to join the regular Navy to go on the buds, and then if you failed, you went back to the fleet for whatever 2-3 years.
You're chip and paint.
And you're chip and paint. So I was like, okay, if I join the Marine Infantry and then I try out for Recon or I try out for snipers and don't make it, then I'm still in the Marine Infantry and you're still doing fun stuff, cool stuff.
Yeah.
So that was my thought process at 17 years old anyways. It seemed like a good decision-making,
It seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah, it worked out all right. So anyways, I joined, there just wasn't, since I was a little guy, I loved the military, grew up skateboarding and rock climbing and, and not really the hunter. My dad wasn't into that. I worked on my cars and I did outdoor stuff. My high school years were in Colorado, so a lot of outdoor stuff and just general mayhem as a kid in the early
rock
90s.
Climbing. This picture that I've got of you, is that you? Is that rappelling? What are you?
Yeah, we're rappelling.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's funny because we were talking about it. My buddy John flew in from Colorado last night, and we were in high school together. He was one of the Marines, right? That was my senior class, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that picture is in Cheyenne Canyon in Colorado Springs, and we literally read a book on how to rappel. We did. This is fuck, man. We were kids, We went to Glenn's surplus store in Colorado Springs, and we bought a 200-foot rope, and we bought a bunch of tubular nylon, and we learned how to tie Ranger seats. And we taught ourselves how to rappel off 200-foot cliffs, and that was our life for years.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
What could possibly go wrong?
We were talking about it last night. If I would go back now and find those kids on a rock and inspect that rope, I'd be like, no, get off of this thing now. Get off of this cliff now. You're gonna kill yourselves. And we used that single rope for
no roadblock.
the whole time. We used one rope.
Stepping on it.
There was no.
Rubbing it across the
rock.
of course.
We didn't know any better. We were like, it's together, so it's going to repel it. So that was that picture.
So you go to boot camp, and then and that's what you went open contract, or you?
No, I was
were
infantry.
Infantry.
Well, that's a funny story. So I was a pretty smart kid, and so I had a 123 GT going in the Marine Corps. No criminal record, none of that. So the recruiter was like, oh yeah, I go and I'm like, look, if I'm going to join the Marine Corps, I'm going to be infantry.
Yeah.
Like if I want to do anything else, if I want to work on planes, I'll go to the Air Force. If I want to be a tanker, I'll go to the Army. Like if I'm joining the Corps, I'm going to be in the grunts.
Makes sense.
And so he's like, oh yeah. So he writes up the UH contract, I'm signing off. The second to last day of boot camp, they hand you your orders. My orders are for Pensacola, Florida on an AE contract, aviation electronics.
Oh.
And the drill instructors are like, hey, does anybody have a problem with their orders? And I'm like, this recruit does. I enlist School of Infantry's in Pensacola, Florida. And they're like, what do you mean? So we go down to, it was 2 days before boot camp because I went visitors Thursday. I sat in admin with my mom on MCRD San Diego. And I always remember it was these two Mexican Marines, like a PFC and a Lance Corporal. And come here, I go over, I hand them my shit. And they're like, what's the problem, dog? And I remember this like clear as day. It's one of my most it's like one of my first like real Marine Corps memories, other than like the boot camp experience. And I'm like, well, I joined to be infantry, but this is aviation electronics. And he goes, yeah, you're right, dog. You're the contract, all the top papers that you signed was UH. All the meat and potatoes was aviation electronics. And he's like, but here's the thing, you can choose. You have a choice now. You can either go to Pensacola and be an F-18 guy, or you can go to the grunts. And I was like, I want to be an infantryman. And the kid's like, you're fucking stupid, dog. And he signed off on the thing and stamped it. And that was my entrance into School of Infantry West.
And he was right?
Yeah, and he was right. Yeah, he was right. Yeah, oh yeah, he's completely right. I mean, who knows where I'd be now, working on F-18s or whatever.
Right?
You would have hated it.
Yeah, definitely. I would have probably stole one and flew it around like that one kid did at Oceana in the day.
Uh-huh.
But
They frown on that.
Yeah, they look down
yeah.
on it. But that's a way to go out of the Marine Corps. How'd you get discharged? Oh, bad conduct. Why? I stole an F-18 and flew it around Virginia Beach a couple laps. That happened.
Yeah.
I had a buddy who was
That's
crew
crazy.
chief with him. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So how do you go from being an infantry guy and find your way into this special pathway?
Oh, man. So I'm going to air some dirty secrets. When I joined the Marine Corps, I was a double pizza box, or marksman for
Really?
Yeah,
That's
non-Marine
interesting.
types.
I was going to say, first you're a good shot, right?
No,
Apparently
no,
not.
I learned it
You
clicked.
just didn't know it.
I just didn't know. I didn't know what a front sight tip looked like. And
Oh.
for the newer generation listening in on this, is
They have
like
no idea.
they have no idea what
No.
we're talking about. We're talking about M16A2s that are silver from
Use.
the
From
abuse,
use, yeah.
use and abuse and cleaning every day for hours and hours. So those old weapons were crap, and then you have a front sight tip that you're aiming slow fire at 500 yards, and you could either shoot or you couldn't.
Yep.
So I was a double marksman, and then I was a squad leader with 1-7 Bravo Company. They call it Baker Company now after the war's kicked off. And I was a squad leader, been to squad leader school, mount instructor course, which was like back in those days, mount
Yeah.
instructor course was like, you were like CQB. And it's like, I look back, I was like, oh my gosh.
That's
We trained
funny.
with BB guns.
Yeah.
It was like.
Which is fun.
Which is fun, yeah. And then I saw a flyer for like the indoc. So when you're in an infantry battalion, you have a scout sniper platoon, and then your scout sniper platoon is either in the S2 or in weapons company. And it really depends on what the OPSO and the battalion commander considers their snipers. Are they a extension of a weapon maneuver weapon element, or are they an intelligence collection, intelligence gathering type eyes and ears?
So those
for
were the two
battalion
primary
commander?
missions for a sniper team,
It's-
basically, right?
it's all in
Long-range
that-
precision fires, or you're collecting information for the commander.
Yeah,
Or
you're the eyes and
reconnaissance
ears for the
surveillance.
battalion commander.
Yeah.
So he is essentially, I don't claim on being a reconnaissance Marine. I never went through BRC or ARS or whatever they call it now, RCO. I never did any of that, but we clearly did more scouting than we did sniping.
Yeah.
And so, you're doing all the reps, HLZ reps, and you're calling for fire, and you're doing handoffs with the FACs and the JTACs and doing those things, because in that employment model for the battalion commander in his area of operations and influence, we would be the guys that would go in and get eyes on the objectives.
So you're patrol heavy at that point.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you're doing
Normally,
way more patrolling than you do
in
anything
29
else.
Paul, you train as a two-man team. So when
Yeah.
you go to Scout Sniper School, you're training as a two-man team. But in the fleet, you very rarely do two-man team type
Yeah.
stuff, unless you're doing like a you're on a Marine Expeditionary Unit doing support to like the MRF or what used to be called DAP, the Direct Action Platoons. That's one of the roles that you can find yourself in if you're lucky enough to get on the MU and qualify for
And
a
MRF
sniper.
is
The Maritime Response Force, right? Yeah, these are all new terms.
And that's
so we're talking
yeah.
old school stuff.
Well, we were Sal and I were laughing about that the other day when we knew you were going to come on about, you know, the history in that, because when I was in Recon, one of the traditional missions was to stick two of you guys on the back of one of our patrols, and at some indeterminate point, you told us what your insert wanted to be, where you wanted to be, and we would get you there and just drop you off on a security hall. And when you get up to leave, you didn't leave.
Yep.
And on the way
and
out,
I did that. I had been attached to 3rd Recon in Okinawa and some training.
It's
and
a great
stuff.
mission.
Yeah, it was great.
It's a great insert, and on the way out, we have a different patrol pass through that area, pick you back up,
yeah.
Right,
and
right.
take you back out.
So that's how I ended up. You know, I really, I mean, I've always been blessed with great leaders in the Marine Corps. I think that's been the biggest thing that I had one that wasn't, and it's the reason why I ended up retiring as a gunny and not a sergeant major. But, you know, whatever, those rounds are downrange, it's water under the bridge. But I was very fortunate to have very level-headed officers who were looking out for my long-term career. And so when I was a squad leader, you know, I'd already been in squad leader school, I'd already been on deployment, I was a pillar within that company. And I went to my platoon commander and I was like, hey, I finally qualified expert. Finally, my third try.
Nice.
And in 29 Palms, by the way, like super windy, where like
wind.
targets are like ripping targets off the stands.
Plus, you
And
got constant glare.
Yeah, and I said, you know, and I want to try out. This is something I always wanted to do. You know, when I joined the Marine Corps, I wanted to be in the infantry, but I specifically wanted to be a scout sniper. I didn't want to go, I wasn't really into the recon thing. It really didn't, I mean, it was there, and I guess I could have, you know, those are the old days where you show up with a ruck at, you know, Los Flores every third Thursday and try out for 6th Platoon. But it was just like, I want to do this. I want to be a scout sniper. And so my platoon commander's like, hey man, I can't fault you. And I remember him saying, if the platoon falls because one guy leaves, I've failed as a leader.
That's a great point.
But that's
Very
rare.
Yeah, very.
That's
very
rare in the
rare.
Marine Corps.
Yeah, right.
That's rare in the Marine Corps.
I got a good guy. I'm not letting him go for
Yeah,
love or money.
yeah. You
Performance
know,
punishment,
I hate
big
those
time.
guys.
talent mismanagement.
Talent mismanagement. That's a good. I
Well,
like that
who
phrase.
do we keep giving the heavier rucksack to? The guy who can do it.
Yeah.
So Jones has
Well,
3
that's what
jobs, and Smith has no jobs.
That's
and
what
Smith
happened to
sucks.
me when I showed up to the fleet. They were like, "Oh, this kid's like, he can hang," you know. Because when you show up to the fleet as a boot, I mean, that movie Jarhead where he shows up and they're in alphas, they get off the bus and all those Marines are on the catwalks.
Yeah.
That was literally my experience. When I saw that movie, I was having PTSD from my first day.
I bet.
Throwing toilet paper at us, like
Yeah.
beating us up and stuff. I mean, it was rough, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like real life back then. There was no internet to save you. There was no ICE reports. Like, you either got the shit kicked out of you or you fell in line. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just the way it was. It was very Spartan.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, the platoon commander, he's like, go for it, man. And I took the indoc about 20. So what happens is, so the scout sniper community, one of the, and I mean, this is my personal opinion, is that it's not much of a community like the recon community. The recon community is a little bit fractured because you have the different cultures at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and then 4th recon. But the scout sniper community, you essentially have mini cultures with every platoon, and then that is impacted by this. Again, my information's a little dated too. There's a lot of evolution going on with the scout sniper community right now.
Yeah.
They're talking about like different MOSs. I think they're running a pilot course on the West Coast right now, essentially taking green guys right out of SOI.
Yeah.
And
Well,
put it-
they got the Zero Hero piece where we work at MARSOC now. As you know,
Oh right.
was that after you left the Institute of the
No,
Zero
no.
Hero
I was there
piece?
when.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there when I put that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's good.
It's a
you know?
huge cost savings, and the guy's either gonna make it or he's not.
Well, you know, I mean, Scout Sniper School for FMF guys, Fleet Marine Force guys,
It's a tough
like
school.
straight up
Yeah.
victory unit. That is your assessment and selection to
Yeah.
get to break into a community
They've
of
got
things.
a tremendous failure rate.
Yeah, it's weird.
Oh
It's
yeah,
bizarre.
it was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, so I show up to my indoc, and it was essentially a hodgepodge 3-day thrash fest in the heat of 29 Palms,
Yeah.
and it was like you just there's no way you can really prepare for that type of thing You either have the fortitude or you don't. You either want it or you don't.
Yeah.
When I got done, it's not, it's funny, it's like, oh, guy, and there are guys out there are some animals out there that just fly through these things. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
I'm 5'7", my right leg is shorter than my left. I'm like the shitty version of Prefontaine, right? And so like I have to try hard, these legs only go so fast, The ruck is like 3/4 of my body.
I feel your pain for it.
Yeah. So, but, and that's what happened. I mean, I showed up and my platoon sergeant at the time, his name is Staff Sergeant Sanderson, and it was like, you're either on board, and they could care less. They could care less that I was a stud in my platoon where I came from. Yeah. We took a written, they wanted to see how good you were at your job. So every MOS from the infantry was showing up for this indoc, so 0351, 0341, 0311. The first thing they did was like this 200 question test on your job, your proficiency on your MOS. And then we just ran our dicks into the ground. And so what I was getting at is that every sniper platoon does it differently. And then some battalion commanders will say, depending on his thoughts on Scout Sniper Platoon, some think that it is a very special thing and they want to treat it as such. Some just see it as a different platoon that does a different mission within his infantry battalion, and they'll paperboard guys and just throw them into a platoon. There's and this is where Scout Snipers really kind of get the short end of the stick, is like the Recon community. Sans Marsoc. Marsoc's not even in this conversation.
Sure,
it's like a totally different thing. I'm talking about FMF. Is the culture surrounding the sniper platoon of Victory Unit can change on a dime.
Personality driven, right?
Because it's personality driven by the leadership. The OPSO doesn't like snipers, so you guys are doing like shit details and barely getting any ammo. This is in the 90s. Now it's different.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot more. Those trials that we went through in those days, you essentially just had to be a badass and you kept to yourself and you did your job.
Well,
you were the epitome of what a Marine infantryman should be in the Marine infantry. Because you weren't at Recon Battalion or you weren't at Force, or whatever.
You
were
there.
Structure. You were there. You were in formation.
But
You
we've
were pressing
reinvented that wheel how many times with snipers now?
Oh,
I mean,
it's
if you
every
think back
2
to the history
years.
of it, we reinvent this constantly, and you'd think by now we'd figure this out. It ain't rocket science.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And really, if I had a critique of the way that the community is going, is that they're really gear focused, and we haven't got away from a 7.62 bolt gun in since Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, there's this whole world of sniping out there, but the procurement guys at Quantico, whatever's happening, I don't know what goes on with the contractual stuff. Like, why are our snipers in the Victor units? Because there's snipers in Recon and Force and that MARSOC. Why are they still treating the Fleet Victor guys as like these bolt gun dudes? And especially since now that the infantry unit squad, an infantry squad, is now fielding a designated marksman.
I was going to ask you about that. So maybe we want to go down that path and find out what's the difference between a sniper and a designated marksman.
Okay, so this is going to be very general. From shooting specifics, a DM trains from a static position at known distance. So he's going to be on Overwatch or Guardian Angel. He's going to know he is firing at 200 yards a week in advance. Yeah. So he sets his gun up, and really all he's doing is observing, and then he's pulling the trigger if he needs to at that yard line.
And this is maneuver element is doing work, and the sniper is sitting in a position to be able to provide counter sniper or
counter sniper, select target. Select target mission always starts
in support of that maneuver.
Yeah, radio operator, then the officer, then the machine gunners. Right, like we have when we talk about what we're selecting with targets of opportunity or selected targets. There's a precedence. Obviously, we don't want the enemy to communicate, so we shut those down first. Then we want to turn them into a bunch of cats, so we shoot the officers, and then Which
is why I would never let the radio operator anywhere near me. Get the hell out of here.
I mean, at least that's the mindset, right? I mean, that was also the mindset pre-Global War on Terror, which now is this totally asymmetric thing. We were, the way I was trained in the late 90s was essentially Russian threat.
That's
So,
right.
or Viet Cong, you
Sure.
know, communist, some type of Marxist.
PCs everywhere. Trucks everywhere.
Just in the trees. In the trees. So, where was I at? So,
Difference between DM and
oh,
Scout
right.
Sniper.
So, in those days, we didn't have DMs in the infantry.
No.
They were in security forces. They were
Mhm.
always in security forces. And I actually did a tour at security forces as a sniper. Well, I was a sergeant and I was in a CQB platoon. I was a section leader, and we had DMs. So I would take my DMs who went to DM school it's at Dam Neck, Virginia. I would take them and then like teach them more advanced stuff, like how to range a target. Now, see, in those days, what really separated a sniper is like things like unknown distance. We would do the nil relation formula with our scopes. A 10 power fixed unirtle, by the way, right? Not that now it's like, you know, they have these range finders
Yeah.
and scopes, and I mean it's
So
a
you were
computers.
doing
They're
you were doing the math, literally.
literally doing the math. We would carry calculators in the field to
Yeah.
do nil relation
Not
formulas.
anymore. We
So-
just had a class on this.
Yeah.
The last MIQC, we had one of the snipers give us a class on
Yeah.
the computers these guys are carrying out to formulate wind and
Yeah.
drift and set. I'm like,
Oh,
oh my
we
god.
Does a
we
lot of
were
work for you,
literally, you had to learn how to shoot.
Yeah.
The art form of shooting, not just cleaning your gun and having a good, alpha 1-1. Your Dodic is nice, and you have a gun that can pump that round at 1,000 yards. We literally had to case our area through map casing, select our tentative firing positions, patrol out there, decide, okay, is this where we want to set up, or are we moving off to this other one? Go to the other one, set up. Then you go to work. Then your work starts in your hide, right? You're like setting up security, starting to mill out the big targets, or at least like trying to get, some type of range, and an angle as well, range angle wind. So, the raw formula, so range angle wind, and start getting ready for targets of opportunity. And then at this, concurrently evasion and,
Yeah.
all those other things that you're working through at the same time. So it can be a very complex mission set. As a corporal, so that's the difference between a DM and a sniper.
Yeah.
A sniper is, he is all things infantry. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the sniper is all things infantry.
Yep.
And he's a field craft genius. He's in the weeds, and he's ready to create hell for the enemy and not be seen and get the hell out of there. Or if he is seen, make a big enough commotion that it puts everybody's heads down and you get the hell out of there, right? So that's the big difference between snipers and DMs. So yeah, but there are snipers, at Recon Battalion. They, everybody.
That's another thing that goes back and forth. We send Recon Marines to sniper school,
Oh yeah.
but then we don't use them as snipers in Recon. They go back to
it's
being
more
a
of like
team leader.
It's like a badge thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
It's a
like,
way of life in a victory unit.
yeah, it is.
And
but
that's the big difference between victory unit scout snipers
It's like an
and guys who
additional-
went to scout sniper school.
It's like an additional skill set.
Yeah,
In the recon.
exactly.
community. Yeah.
And the thing is that there's my Steffens, who I see is a very famous Marine, now retired Sergeant Major William Skiles. He was my Steffens, who I see at sniper school right when he came back from the British Commandos.
Wow.
yeah.
This guy hammered us.
I bet.
Wild Bill Skiles is well known, he's drill instructor, triple threat, recon, Salwick, drill instructor, sniper, commando, has his green beret.
Salwick, can you just explain that acronym?
Salwick, small arms weapons instructor. It doesn't even exist anymore. I did have the opportunity to be a Salwick as well, so that was a great course.
Yeah.
And,
Where was that at?
Quantico, Weapons Training Battalion.
Because all the snipers used to go. Quantico was the only place we trained snipers for years and years and years when I first came in the Marine Corps.
Sure, yeah. That's
That
and
was
it's
it.
still the the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's still like
So
Mecca.
everything you've talked about so far explains some of the reason why people might fail on the shooting side. Is stalking also something that causes people a lot of problems?
So
and why would you
stalking
say?
is actually the highest attritter of candidate snipers.
And so, what is stalking, and how would that work in the school? What are they looking for in the schoolhouse to make you so that you? would
Well,
pass it?
okay, I'm going to be dated, and so for listeners or guys who are in the community now, I'll just apologize because this is just kind of the
It's a
older
little
way.
older, yeah.
So, when I went to school, there were 10 graded stocks. You had 2 practice stocks and then 10 graded stocks. And essentially, it's the students against the teachers. So they set up 1,000 yards downrange. There, if you see the movie like Clear and Present Danger,
exactly.
it's very much like that. It's actually very much like that. That was actually filmed on Camp Pendleton, where I went to sniper school. When I went to sniper school, Chavez, that actor, there were pictures of him in the sniper school because they were like the technical advisors.
Yeah.
Even though it's like in the book and the movie, they're at Fort Ord with 7th Infantry Division, but that's like Tom Clancy world. So, anyways, the stock is 1,000-yard range essentially. The students, this is all the ghillie suits. This is what you think of a sniper, right?
Yeah.
The ghillie suits and the drag bag, and and I went through sniper school in Camp Pendleton in the summer. So it was not fun dressing up in like cold weather gear essentially,
Yeah.
and then dragging yourself for 4
A
hours.
canvas suit from your head to your toes.
Yeah,
basically.
How
just,
comfortable that must be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the poison ivy and the ticks and everything
yeah.
else you get with the summers of Camp Pendleton.
And then so just I'm not to oversimplify, but there's people who listen that have nothing to do with the
Yeah, no,
military.
I
So
get it.
you have to sneak up on the instructors. 1,000 yards?
Yeah, so
And they
what-
know
within
you're
a certain
coming.
distance.
Yeah. So again, I don't know what the actual requirements now, but I'll just tell you what ours was. And like every good Marine, our shit was harder than these new guys.
The last hard class.
Yeah,
that
I
out
was in the last hard class, right? Everything I did was the last hard thing, right? So, they start you off at the OP. That's the truck where the instructors were up in their seats and they have binos and they're looking for students. They start you there so you can kind of get like a reference of where they're at in the terrain. And then they run your ass to the start line in your ghillie suits with your drag bag. So you got everything in your drag bag, your gun and all that shit. They run you back and then you're wearing your suit. Then you veg up. So we always carry around hedge clippers. So you're like, the ghillie suit doesn't hide you. The ghillie suit breaks your outline up. It makes you not look like a human.
Yep.
What hides you is the vegetation that's around you, the natural environment. So the term we use is veg is the edge, right? So you get back to the start point. They give you like a couple minutes to veg up, and you're like, you and a partner are just like shoving it into the ghillie
sticks
suit,
and
and
leaves
and you get good at it. I mean, it's like anything else. It's a repetition. You can do it real fast. And then they tell you you're under observation, and you literally drop to the ground, and you have 4 hours to make your first shot. So in those days, we had to sneak within. Now it's different. Like if you get busted out of range, I think you get some points, but within range was within 300.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to get within 300, and then you take your first shot, and then a walker comes over. He's got a stick, and he says, within 10, and then they start searching for you within 10 meters. And then they say, okay, go ahead and identify. And they have like cards. They like hold them up on their covers, and they'll either have like numbers because they want to make sure you're actually seeing them.
Yeah.
Because we're loopholes, right? Like
Yep,
you're
yep.
burning holes through trees
And grass. And
just
Yeah.
to see that
bushes.
tip of that dude's hat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? That's the art form of it all. It's not like I set up and I'm looking at him and he's looking at me.
Right.
Like there's a whole technique to burn a window.
Yeah.
That's what we call it.
Yeah.
So like move to identify, and then once that's good, you take your second shot with him looking in your general direction. And then they're looking for like movement. So like, did you clear your blast lane, all that stuff. And so each one of those is a point. So you start off at, I think it was when you get within 3, you get 3 points. If you get busted out of range 0, you get a goose egg. If you got 2 goose eggs, you're out of the school. Period. Boom. Done.
That's why it's so tough.
Yeah.
To pass, you had to get a minimum of, I want to say it was like 65 points, but 2 of those stocks had to be perfect 10s. You had to like nail it. So stalking, so I'm going to brag a little bit. I don't ever brag, by the way. So this is a very rare
knew?
thing. But I graduated honor man from Scott Sniper School and high shooter. I graduated with a 65 stock.
Wow.
And I was the first, I didn't retread. There were guys second, third time retreads.
Yep.
Yeah.
And those dudes actually make the best snipers because they're signing back up for
Get more reps, really.
Yeah.
well, and I think it's the fortitude, right? Because nobody wants to go through that shit again.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I sure as hell couldn't do it now. When I was 19 and full of piss and vinegar, but even then, it's like, I mean, it is a slug, right?
I bet you could do it.
I get, yeah, hell yeah, dude.
This is how old guys get hurt.
I know,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
true.
We're
yeah,
gonna go out in the
That's
front
so
yard
true.
after this show.
Meniscus.
We're gonna go outside and we wrestle on the front lawn, and someone's
Yeah.
gonna get hurt. You kids are not doing it.
So I would say the first attritor, you know, the attrition mechanism is definitely stalking. You're either good at it or you're not. And you can learn as you go. The other thing too that people don't understand about stalking is that there's like 20 other students competing for the right lane to get into. And so in the sniper community, by the way, when you're a sniper, you're known as a hog, hunter, gunman. And when you're in a sniper platoon, but not a sniper, you're known as a pig.
Okay.
So at sniper school, so hog is hunter, gunman, pig is professionally instructed gunman. And there's a whole story with British snipers and where that term came from, the hog thing. So we call it like a pig trail, right? So one guy will be like a good stalker. Like this dude's like talented stalker. He's just a bush
Natural,
baby.
like a natural.
He's a natural. And everybody will like fall in line behind him. And literally you'll have like 15 students like pig trailing
Oh, that's funny.
going down this thing, right? And like the guy's like, get the fuck away from me, because like you have less talented dudes behind you making overhead movement,
Yep.
you know,
And you can
bumping
get
into
caught because
stuff,
of them.
and you can get caught, right? Because there's only, and the other thing too is there's only a limited number of options on a stalk lane. So like you have 20 students like crawling, literally crawling, sometimes high crawling, or we call it weasel walking, like
Yeah.
bent over, like staying low. But you're competing to get into pole position.
Yeah.
So it's also a race.
And it's timed.
It's a very slow
And
race.
it's timed.
And it's
And
timed.
it's timed.
Wow.
So there's all those elements that go into it, and you're just like
Yeah.
praying to God. The one of the 10s that I busted, I was actually standing up, like I was on my tippy toes, and I'd worked myself into this like for listeners, if you're familiar with Camp Pendleton, as you're coming into Margarita down
Yeah.
Battalion,
Yeah.
and you come down that, like the old 25 area combat towns on your left, and you come down that hill, and then you can make the right to go up to Margarita,
Yeah.
or like continue straight to go across the bridge to the airfield.
Yeah.
There's a lone tree right there in that corner there. That was the stalk lane, was coming down that hill.
Oh god.
So you're like, your back is exposed
Oh, wow.
to the OP. And the instructors were down at the corner of Barcelona and
Nothing but
Margarita.
grass on that hill.
Exactly.
I know exactly
What I
that'd
did,
be a
what
tough-
I did,
tough
and we
job.
started on the other side of that one was a really short stalk, but it was very tough.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
it's like they're all like puzzles basically.
Yeah.
What I did is I worked myself over to Barcelona and I crawled down the gutter in Barcelona. Like cars are like going past, and I came down that and I worked myself into that tree, and that tree is still there. I was there in November,
Yeah.
and every time I pass that tree, I'm like, yeah, I worked myself into that tree, and I set my gun up on this branch, and I was like popping right out from the trunk, and I busted a 10. They did not see me, and I was on my
Nice.
tippy toes. So people think that you have to be like low to the ground, like the Carlos Hathcock, you know,
yeah.
model, or Tom Berenger. Sometimes you're skull dragging, right? Like that's what the visual image is called.
Yeah.
Like the mental image is called skull dragging, where you're like just moving along.
Inches at a time. Right?
And that happens, but when you get good at it, you learn how to bound.
But I think
from-
you just said something really important. Like these are each stalk is it's a puzzle.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out. And it may require skull dragging or it may not.
and you may make the right choice, and you may
may
not.
not.
Right? And it's like shooting, right? So like then you don't do so well on a stalk.
Yeah.
Rounds are downrange. It's not like you just adjust fire and keep shooting,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
tighten up your shot group.
Yeah.
But you guys know this as being Marines. Guys go to the range and just fall apart, right? Like the first round that doesn't hit black, they're like, "Oh God, I'm gonna unk." It's like, dude, what did you expect? You were gonna go clean on the range? Like
Right.
everybody drops a round or two.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, so like, and so stalking has that same effect on you where you're like, oh man. And also at sniper school, you're getting graded, like legitimately in a grading matrix, like 5 or 6 things a day. You're doing a stalk, you're doing an observation, you're doing a quiz, you're doing a shoot, and you're doing, what was the other thing we used to do? Every day for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
So all those grades have to add up to 80% to graduate. So there's no 80s gravy in sniper school. You have to show up every day
Yeah.
nailing it, because even your hardest try, you might fail.
Yeah.
It just that's how the cards fell that day, you know, like, And so it teaches you that resiliency. Your feet are hamburger, you're fucking all chafed up from all your gear. And it was all the old gear, by the way. You're literally like cutting iso mat and riggers taping it to your, this shit's like cutting into you and open sores and stuff.
So riddle me this: all the work that you do for stalking, then you deploy for combat as a sniper. How much stalking did you actually do when you went to Iraq?
When I went to Iraq, I did one legitimate stalk. But that skill set is important. Okay. So the things you learn in greenside stalking are applicable even in an urban environment. There's some tricks of the trade to urban hides and urban stalking, but it's essentially the same mentality. But that is a hard skill that you like stalking, and they've talked about dropping stalking because of GWAT, right? So like,
whoa.
Because of this question.
This is why I asked the question.
No, it's good. It's intuitive because a lot of, they're like, well, why are we wasting time on this? And it's like, we're getting away from the point of what stalking is.
Yeah.
It's a decision-making thing. It's a fortitude thing. It's a resilience thing. Can you do all those skill sets at one? When you're talking, I mean, we're all trainers, so we understand like, individual training and, putting those together and combining those knowledge, skills, and attitudes, KSAs, right? Yeah. It's been a little bit.
That's okay.
I'm not teaching every day anymore. But putting those KSAs together, right? Combining those KSAs, stalking is one of the most pure forms of combining things. And it's like high school wrestling. You can't hide behind the D line, or you know what I mean? You can't hide in your baseball team. Yeah. Like you step up to the mat and somebody's getting their hand raised and somebody isn't. That's right. And that's what stalking does for Marine. You could be the baddest dude with you could be the most soft-spoken dude, or you could be the baddest dude walking into that schoolhouse on day one.
They're not mutually exclusive either, by the way.
Yeah, the great equalizer is stalking.
Yeah.
You can either do it or you can't.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that I'm a huge fan of stalking, even though we don't do it a lot. But in terms of like a war story with stalking, like traditional sniper mission, this was 2004 outside of Fallujah, but pre Phantom Fury. So we were doing a lot of like route security and stuff as we were building up for going into Fallujah. I was a platoon sergeant at the time, and I was just pulling duty essentially, and we were going out to this OP where some grunts were set up with a couple of machine guns, and it was kind of like the Roman Empire is like just like OP every few miles up MSR Mobile for the guys who know what I'm talking about. So there was a tier 1 IED site that they wanted checked out. And the only way to get there from where we were at was to cross Mobile through a village and then get over to where this other road was. So it was about a click and a half. And about 2 a.m, we suited up and we essentially stalked through the outskirts of that village and got into position. We didn't take any shots on any dudes, but that's what we were trying to do, is intercept IED. It was a tier 1 IED site. So, but we legitimately, like, I had a bolt gun and a knife. And I maybe had a pistol on me, but what good does a pistol do in the middle of Iraq,
Yeah.
It's just a couple more pounds of shit that won't work.
The tyranny of distance.
Yeah.
The tyranny of distance.
So
how is that different than setting up in an urban site?
So an urban site, there's just, unfortunately, if you remember back in the days, like some of these undeveloped snipers were trying to do things that weren't kosher, and so they got themselves hemmed up. There's a more famous one. It was actually my sister platoon 2-4 when I was the 3-5 platoon sergeant. We were up to bat when they were in Ramadi. So when they got hammered, that was our sister platoon.
Yeah.
Like, I knew the platoon sergeant. We all were on the same camp, and we were at San Mateo 62 area. And so, but you're one, logistically it's different. You're carrying in like screens, like literally we buy rolls of screens and backdrops, like black trash bags and stuff, and basically you manipulate the shadow environment.
So it's not like in the Hollywood movies where the sniper just
it's exactly
leans out the window with his sniper rifle.
It's exactly like that.
So I think you're thinking Newark, New Jersey.
Come on.
But and then in a training environment, There's no civilians. There's no furniture. There's no dogs barking at you.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no neighbors. There's no daily routine. People waking up, making tea and bread and right. So when you do that in Iraq, in the early days, essentially what we did is we took over a house.
Yeah.
You know, and you had to get in position. And then as the ROEs matured, those things were going away because like you know, for layman's terms, it's like you have a family here and you're trying to do a mission, you like put them in a bedroom and hold security on them. As a matter of fact, dudes actually made friends with a lot of those families. You know, it's not like they were bad people.
Yeah.
They're
Stuck.
yeah, they were born in Fallujah. I mean, they just got the shit end of the stick.
Yeah.
You know, they did not hit the lottery
Like we did.
like we did.
Yeah.
And I, by the way, I mean, I consider ourselves like very lucky people on this earth.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's those. You're in control of your world in a green environment. Technically speaking, you can plan for a lot of the things. You know, you can set claymores up if a guy's going to walk this way or whatever. You have your evasion plans, you have your breakout drills and all that. In an urban environment, it's an exchange, right? There's so many variables.
Interesting.
Like a green environment is a more of a two-dimensional environment where urban environment's more of a three-dimensional environment.
Proving yet again, urban environments.
So it's an exchange with just the daily
Much more
population.
Yeah.
Where when you're hidden, you're dealing with like compromise from like dogs or you know the famous one goat herders and shit like that.
There's nothing we do that you want to do in an urban environment as Marines. It's the worst place we ever want to be is in an urban environment.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we've become masters of it.
Yeah,
I think.
It's the most complicated.
It just makes things so exponentially harder.
Yeah, and you know the other thing too is that like, when I'm talking about strictly Marine infantry, right? And then you put those dudes in like a really tight rule of engagement environment. Like Marines are Marines. Like the way I grew up as a Marine is like we were the crash and bang dudes.
Yeah.
The Army did the occupation, like Somalia, crash and bang. We're out of there.
Yeah.
Army take over and do stability operations.
Go pass out soccer balls.
You know, and for what it's worth, I was a staff sergeant when the war kicked off, and I went to war as a senior guy. So I had to learn real quick because for essentially 8 years prior to that, it was range 400 and you know the linear conventional threat, you know, anti-armor stuff. You know, just
That's interesting because we're sort of transitioning. The Marine Corps now is sort of transitioning back to that peacetime environment, and so the shenanigans.
You
are
should
beginning.
watch the
near
show.
peer is a great word to get the industrial machine moving.
We
right?
see it at work every day. I mean, you can see.
There's a shift.
Sal and I are trying to tell these cats, like, boys, the fun meter's over. We're
it's
going.
time to get.
What do you
back
mean? No, I'm like.
Well, you know, I think that the wars, it became the threat that we were going was extremely defined, very asymmetric, but very, very defined. So you can tailor your culture to that. You can your warfighting culture. You can tailor your gear to that. You can tailor your tactics to that. And we kind of walked that rabbit hole for a long time. I don't see a very like jack of all trade unit anymore. But in the day, like an infantry unit could be on Okinawa, it could be on ship, it could be doing the firefighting. They used to have the fire response battalions on Pendleton, go up to Yosemite and, you know, they're up there.
handing out rations in humanitarian.
Yeah, humanitarian,
disasters.
Haiti.
Think about
you
the
know?
class we got right now. None of those guys have been on ship.
Yeah,
None of them.
it's true.
Yeah, very
Me and
few
Sal
go
got
to
a ton of
Oki.
ship time.
Yeah.
There's Marines these days that just they don't see the world. They go to their unit and they, you know, like our day. Well, your day, you guys are a lot older than
We're not that much older.
But when I say our day, I'm talking like SNAML, pre-internet.
Yeah.
Right. In my mind, that's when the Corps changed.
Yeah.
Is when a bunch of kids go to the chow hall instead of like talking shit about each other and like getting in fights out back because one guy took it too far. You go to the chow hall now and it's like all the Marines are in the thing like doing this.
We've had that discussion
we
too.
sure have.
Right. Like and so in our day, right, we didn't know what was coming. September 11th wasn't even imaginable. I mean, September 11th wasn't imaginable until that morning.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were, you know, it was like, well, we have to be ready for just kind of any contingency. I mean, that's America's 911 force.
No, it was true though.
We're not doing that anymore. And we don't do expeditionary operations.
Yeah.
We have fucking green beans coffee and ice cream shops in a war zone.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we're there for 18 years.
Yeah. Where's my cut?
I mean, that might be a real loose correlation, but to me, that's a mindset thing.
Look at the French Foreign Legion. They don't do any of that shit.
Hell no, they don't do any of that shit. You want to win the war, stop loss everybody in theater and take green beans coffee and salsa night out of the chow hall.
Wow. Mutiny. There'd be a mutiny.
This is a whole nother podcast, by the way.
By the way.
This is like the strategic studies thing coming in, but we're getting off topic. Of
Chris, that's
sniping.
all right. I appreciate you coming out.
I hope
brother.
that
it's been
that was I hope
Really
that was good.
illuminating. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah,
very
very
much.
And just to cap it off, snipers are better than recon Marines.
Are they?
There we go.
Are they? All right, brother.
Love you guys, man. Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate it.
Right on, bro.